What is up, everyone? Sergeant Archibald here, and let's see if this audio is working. Okay, yes, it is. But yeah, today we're going to be reacting to What If Germany Won World War II? Part 2. Yes. If you didn't react to Part 1, please react to it. Because I don't know why, but some people some people watch Part 2 and then they don't watch Part 1. It's weird. But I don't know. Just if you haven't watched Part 1, watch Part 1. Um, Maybe I'm gonna put like a tag or something, like at the top right or something, so you can click on it. But anyways, without further ado, let's get started.
Europe has fallen to
Oh gosh, that is loud.
Germany. The Allies are nothing more than a footnote in history, and former Slavic lands are now breadbaskets for the Aryan race. This is part 2 to my series, What If Germany Won World War II?
And again, Aryan is not what you think it means. That the whole Aryan concept is a myth. Like, the Nazis never said Aryan. Like, Aryan literally just means, like, Indo-European people from, like, South Asia. Somewhere around there. Like, that's why the country of Iran is called Iran. It's named after Aryan, aka the people, like, the people that live there.
If you haven't watched part 1, click here so you can catch up on the scenario. We left part 1 with a Europe now not only under Nazi occupation, but
also it really bothers me how they have that, like, line right there. You see that line that, like, cuts across the ocean? I don't like that. Please fix that. Please, that really bothers me.
subjected to fascist dominance as well. In our timeline across the Western world, a counterculture movement split generations apart. In this alternate timeline, the generations are still divided, however with a cultural split between some of the older generation and their fanatical, indoctrinated children. The older generations still support the fascist states, but just not to the emotional extent that the newer, more impressionable generation does. Party education teaches not only who was the enemy, but to encourage and train children to use outright violence against those deemed a threat to Germany. With each passing generation, children become more violent, fanatical, and devoted to an ever-secured ideology. Education becomes mandatory by the state, but
Jeez, that sucks.
the type of education would be only to solidify the racial ideology of the party, nothing else. History, science, and the humanities are taught in the perspective of the Germans against all, or to shape the mindset of the Aryan destiny. Use of violence against undesirables and military service to the state is idealized and praised. For a man to be a true citizen of Germany, he would have to serve in the armed forces, and for a woman to be married and bear children. To many German children, they were born into a society which actively praises.
Jeez, I wonder what the population would be today in that case. Well, actually, probably pretty low, since, like, tens of millions of people are dead now.
Them for just being born. They would have never seen any atrocities or brutality, as those methods rid the fatherland of minorities.
Oh yeah, if you think about it, like in our timeline, really, like, most allied nations, like, most people didn't know about the Holocaust or what was going on. But it wasn't until, like, the soldiers actually liberated the concentration camps of Poland and Germany, all those other places, that they actually knew the Holocaust and the full extent of the Holocaust. But in this timeline, it's more kept a secret. So, um, like, Nazism doesn't completely lose credibility like it did in our timeline. Kind of interesting.
Long ago. Any mention of such methods
Oh, it's that same picture that they used, like, in the last video a million times.
would be praised as actions of heroes and made in legend, except for the true extent and methods of the Holocaust, which is a closely guarded secret. Throughout this series, I'm sure you've been wondering, wouldn't people eventually revolt against the fascists? Wouldn't they?
Like, I bet if the Holocaust didn't happen, and, like, none of that stuff happened, like, it would be seen, like, as communism or something, or socialism. Like, something that's has an extreme ideology, but not seen as, like, absolutely evil, which it is. I don't know, it's kind of interesting. And it's so dumb, like, it would have been so much better for Hitler to just wait until after World War II to do the Holocaust. Like, he kind of shot himself in the foot there. Like, not only he made Nazism lose credibility, he lost millions of people, like millions of potential Jewish people that could have fought for him or worked in the factories back at home or did whatever. It helped instigate rebellion and partisans, especially Slavic partisans. So yeah, that whole Holocaust thing, it really that really um that's added to the defeat. Like, yeah, it was just a bad idea.
They see the oppressive policies and unite against the puppet states and even a Nazi Germany against Hitler himself? How would such a reality even become a reality? Simply from a military victory. The Nazi victory and fascist states they propped up all easily could have fell into disorder or at least civil war, even if Germany won World War II. Nazism in our timeline was a quick experiment. It burnt hot, but quickly was snuffed out. We can never truly know how Nazis would hold on to their great empire if they achieved military victory.
Honestly, I think a realistic scenario is that because of the unsustainable, like, policies, economic policies, and just their massive militarism, I think that it would have probably fallen apart. And the fact that they're so overstretched in all these lands, I think it would have fallen apart. And once Hitler dies, there would have been like a giant civil war. I think that's the most likely scenario. I don't think a Nazi empire or a fascist empire would be sustainable at all. Seriously.
This scenario was simply the best case scenario for the Nazis, considering they don't botch the odds against themselves. If things did not go perfectly for the Nazis, they would deal with full-out insurrection, rebellion, and civil war in occupied territories, and perhaps even fighting amongst Nazis inside the party in Germany itself, all which would certainly harm the stability of the Third Reich. If Nazism was to survive and keep its hold on Europe, it would need to deeply ingrain itself in the hearts and minds of the conquered. Military victories would certainly give credit to the government, but two other factors are just as important: economic stability and the infallibility of the leader. In this alternate scenario, if the Nazi economic model held up, created jobs, and allowed good standards of living in the first decade after the war, Europeans would not only accept the new status of German domination, but actively support the fascist governments set up in place. It would legitimize fascism as a new theory to govern by, like monarchy, democracy, or socialism. Nazism is practically a cult, one that takes the word of the Führer, Adolf Hitler, as law. If Hitler or a new leader somehow lost credibility within the early years of the Reich, the system would be at risk of being weakened. As the decades move on, this becomes less of a risk as Nazism forms a solid bedrock foundation through myth and legend. The best comparison is with the founding fathers to the United States. Violence is used across fascist Europe against political opponents and critics, silencing any immediate threats by gunpoint or deportation.
Oh my gosh, he has a black paper. Shoot him.
This decreases the threat of rebellion as political critics are killed off with frightening efficiency. What would life be like for the average German inside the Third Reich? In our timeline, the Western world sees a capitalist and consumerist lifestyle. In North Korea, the state rules everything. In Australia, emus and dingoes wage brutal genocide against the populace. What could we expect in an alternate Nazi Germany society? It's difficult to assume how a short experiment like the Confederate States could have survived without the North. It would be just as difficult to assume the peacetime economic policies of the Third Reich, say a decade or two after the war. Like I said, Nazism was a movement which burned hot and went out fast. Its creation and sustainability in our timeline depended on having an enemy to fight. This isn't to say it would collapse.
Yeah, like, guys, you need to read the Vampire Economy. It is such a great book, and it explains the Nazi economic policies very well, and it shows like how unsustainable they are. It's really interesting.
But it certainly would have to adapt to a continent without enemies. Nazism didn't place, but it certainly would have to adapt to a continent without enemies. Nazism didn't place economics as a crucial
I'm trying to think, because, like, never mind.
important thing. Hitler saw economic policy as simply a way to fuel the eventual war effort and sustain it, a secondary factor to building the army and achieving Lebensraum. It's hard to predict how the Third Reich could handle its own economy after the war and after the Russians were destroyed. Nazism was a product of its time. Predicting its economy would be comparable to predicting how the United States would run its internal affairs today based off how the economy was conducted in 1920. We wouldn't see crucial factors which propped up and changed the course. So predicting how Hitler could have dealt with, say, an economic crash or an oil crisis would not be entirely accurate. I can't go into much detail about how the German economy would be after the war, but I can say a brief generalization. I believe that the Reich would organize its economy simply off of Lebensraum. Every part of the German society, the economy, government, and people itself was simply to wipe out the enemy.
Also, this is very controversial, but a lot of you actually watched the documentary that I'm talking about. Hitler was actually a socialist. I know, it sounds weird, but, it's just called National Socialism after all, but, like, he implemented a lot of, labor-friendly policies, like, for the common people. Like, he passed a bunch of laws, sort of, I guess, protect them. I don't know, I'm describing this really badly, but he made a lot of regulations to protect the worker. And after the war, he was actually planning to, like, base his economy after socialism. It's really interesting.
Of the Reich. Once Lebensraum.
Yeah, you guys need to, like, watch the multiple documentaries by this guy named Tick on YouTube. He makes a very interesting case. I think one of his videos are he has one video that is hours long. I think it's like 10 hours long or something. It is crazy. Or 6 hours long. And he outlines this point. And he has many other videos about this too. It is crazy. He does a ton of research.
Was achieved. I believe in this alternate.
Like, even Hitler himself, if you look at his quotes, he even says that, like, he's a socialist.
Timeline, the Nazi Party would reorganize the economy away from the war effort and focus its economy on what best suits maintaining the land it conquered. Standard of living can fall, production of goods can fall, starvation could occur, but the Nazis would never allow 1 inch of land to fall into the hands of the enemy. The Reich never trades with nations outside its realm of influence. This isn't much of a problem considering the Reich has influence over the British, French, and Italians for resources. Raw materials are harnessed through slave labor in the Russian colonies. The German people could see a society of great wealth and prosperity, or one of poverty and rations. No matter what in this alternate timeline, their fate would depend on the military expeditions of the Reich. Society would accept that above all else, territory is what truly matters, above individual fulfillment. In our timeline, one thing that stands out about Nazi Germany, apart from the brutal conquest and genocidal nature, was the advances the Germans made in military technology. How would this have progressed if the Third Reich had not collapsed? Eugenics, social Darwinism, and genealogy were all popular across the Western world at the time, but used by the calculating Nazis to legitimize their objectives for the Aryan race. These were not new ideas created by Hitler, but they were areas of academia that the Nazis harnessed for their own ideology. In our timeline, Nazism made eugenics.
Okay, here it is. I found the quote. This is Hitler, in his that he wrote in his second book after Mein Kampf. But this book was never published, actually. I am a socialist. I see no class and no socialist state before me, but that community of the Volk, made up, and Volk means the people, made up of people who are linked by blood, united by language, and subject to a same general fate. It's kind of interesting. It's sort of like a racial socialism, like socialism, but based off of his ideas of race. Our adopted term socialist has nothing to do with Marxist socialism. Marxism is anti-property. True socialism is not. True, notice how it says true socialism. But anyways, this is Hitler in 1930. But yeah, two interesting quotes. But yeah, let's continue.
In social Darwinism unpopular, but had they won the war, research and the ideas would have become far more popular across Europe and the globe. Inhuman experiments on Untermensch still continue in this alternate timeline, sponsored by the government. Scientific advancement is determined by politics. In our timeline, half of Germans in university were studying medicine. Genetics and medical studies were preferred by the state to maintain a healthy and efficient Aryan race. Women would be discouraged from pursuing education or careers that were not beneficial to producing children. Technology is only advanced that is positive to the state. Tech that is threatening to the Reich is discouraged to be continued. Communication.
Oh, so interesting. They can get the evolution of phones. Look at that thing. That is crazy. Whoa. And that's not, that doesn't even show the modern cell phone.
Like cell phones, the internet, and other forms of communication easy to spread ideas are killed in development, never made available to the masses. Generations of lawyers, scholars, scientists, and engineers grow up fed the propaganda of the state. If Nazi plans were successful, the intellectuals of Nazi Germany hold an extremely violent ideology close to heart. If communication is advanced, it will only be in the control of the state. Technology, which makes the exchange of ideas easier, would be heavily restricted by the Reich. Television and radio are left under the control of the regime. With the German economy dedicated to the military, weapon technology advances much faster than in our timeline. In this alternate timeline, a continent-wide empire uses most of its resources to get an advantage over its enemies. Moving on, in this alternate timeline across the continent, fascism wouldn't be one universal cookie-cut ideology. Each nation would adapt fascist beliefs to their
Yeah, this even happened in real life. Like, Tick, the same guy that I just talked about earlier, I'm not even sure this is true or not, by the way. I'm just, like, saying what he said because I think it's interesting. I haven't researched it enough. But there's a lot of people that say that Nazism is a completely different, separate thing from fascism, which is, it's kind of an interesting idea. But, yeah. But definitely in real life, even if you think that Nazism is fascism, it definitely branched out. Like, Italian fascism was very different than German fascism, for example, because Italian fascism wasn't as race-based, while German fascism was very race-based.
National identity. For example, France, Italy, and Spain would boast Catholicism as their national religion. To make fascism more acceptable, it would be associated with already existing ideas. In our timeline, Vichy France created laws which were to reverse the effects of the liberal French Revolution. In this alternate scenario, this is the universal theme across Nazi-influenced Europe, as liberal and Enlightenment beliefs are slowly strangled. In France, the government creates a more conservative, authoritarian.
Hopefully this video doesn't get heavily disliked because I'm talking about my opinions.
And Catholic state. This is different than the Nazis.
Because, like, I'm sorry to pause this, but, like, I remember in one video, I speculated, hey, and guys, in my opinion, I actually think that, the United States won the War of 1812, or something like that. I don't remember exactly what I said. And my War of 1812 reaction video. And oh my gosh, I got like a lot of dislikes for that.
Hitler aimed to reinvent German society. The Vichy French simply used the existing conservative elements of French society. Nazi persecution of Catholics in their eastern territories creates tension between the French and Germans, but faced with the overwhelming threat of force, the Vichy French would voice little public opinion about it and do little action against it. In our timeline, the Nazis held French prisoners of war as practical hostages in labor camps. I believe in this alternate scenario, the same tactics would be used to make sure the populace and governments would not react against German puppet masters. Britain and its empire become the apple in the eye for the Germans. In this alternate timeline, Britain has lost the air battle with the Luftwaffe, and German troops successfully invaded and occupied the island nation. The royal family fled to Canada, but the remaining remnants of the British government are dissolved, replaced with a temporary military government. After the invasion, the occupying Germans treat the British kindly, even going so far to pay for goods and services. The plan was to ease the occupied British into accepting the new government, disband any fear from the stories of Poland and Russia, it would be a campaign of kindness. However, after months of kindness, the Germans would secretly implement purges against any political and social groups seen as a threat to the Reich. After occupying Britain for an unspecified amount of time, the Nazis would allow a puppet British government to operate once again. This is also needed to maintain the global empire that stretched across Africa and Asia. Switzerland would have eventually fell. Hitler absolutely despised the Swiss and would have invaded.
Yeah, there's even a quote, like Hitler, like a quote, translated to English, obviously. He says something like, Switzerland is a pimple on the face of Europe. Yeah, he really hated Switzerland. The only reason why he did it was, one, because Switzerland had a very large amount of fortifications everywhere, and like landmines on bridges and stuff. They were very heavily fortified. Two, because the entire country is like covered by the Alpine
had the
Mountains.
war in Russia.
And three, oh yeah, they had like all this gold that they were gonna threaten to destroy. So yeah,
not gone so
like they held a bunch of German gold that they were threatening to destroy.
terribly. In this alternate timeline, if Hitler was able to win the war on both fronts, Switzerland is invaded and dissolved. Alternate timeline, I believe the relationship between Nazi Germany and Italy would have gotten far worse. I mentioned in part 1 how Hitler's views on race created tension between him and Benito Mussolini. But this wasn't the only issue between the two. In our timeline, the relationship between Italy and Germany was one of convenience and military protection. The war pact was one that would last only 10 years. That was it.
Really?
While Italy under Mussolini talked a big game, it simply did not have the resources or industrialization that Germany did to reclaim the Roman Empire. Mussolini even told Hitler that Italy would not be ready for a war at least until 1942, upon which Hitler ignored and invaded Poland, dragging the Italians along with him. Modern Italy was...
Yeah, honestly, like, there's a pretty good case to be made that if Italy did not join the war, Germany would have done better. Seriously. Like, Italy barely helped against France. Like, the only good thing they did was draw like a bunch of troops in Africa. But even then, the German troops, like, were pretty good. And maybe they could have survived in French-occupied Africa and lands or something like that and fought there. And tied them up there. But, like, Italy, like, they delayed Operation Barbarossa as well. Yeah. They didn't help against France. They forced Germany to help them a bunch, wasting troops. They created a third front against Germany whenever the Allies landed in Sicily. It's ridiculous. Like, come on, man. Come on. Why?
simply not built for fighting. As the conflict raged on, the Italian armies failed to capture North Africa and the Balkans. Relations between the two deteriorated.
Not true. They captured the Balkans. Like, if by the Balkans you mean Croatia, Bosnia, Albania, and part of Greece.
I predict the relationship going down two possible paths. One, after the defeat of the Russians and no real enemy on the horizon, the Italians simply become too much of a burden and Nazi Germany invades their former ally. Northern Italy is assimilated into the Reich. Southern Italy is devolved into a poor outer state. The Italians are unable to put up much of a resistance against the massive, powerful...
Well, I don't know. Like, Italy, there's a ton of mountains in Italy. And there's especially the Alpine mountains at the very beginning. And there's a bunch of rivers, too. So, it is possible that the Italians would pose a good, like, defense, which would discourage Germany from invading them, you know?
German war machine. Second, if the relationship remained stable and Germany did not invade, the Nazis would have loomed over Italy for decades. Mussolini's Italian empire is nothing more than a puppet to the Nazi Reich. Italy could hold territory in the Balkans, Mediterranean, and North Africa. However, it is dependent on Germany to maintain control over them. In the immediate aftermath of Nazi victory, thousands die from government neglect, rape, and reprisals for uprisings against the occupiers. Even in states like Greece, Yugoslavia, and other regions not set for depopulation like in Russia. Europe's map is redrawn to include regimes only loyal to the Axis. Greece is renamed to the Hellenic Republic, Yugoslavia is disbanded and split among the...
what's the difference between Greece and the Hellenic Republic? Like, cause I heard, like, wasn't Greece called that at one point? I don't know. Can one of you inform me of that in the
The
comments?
independent state of Croatia, Albania, and Italy. In this alternate timeline, Europe is transformed into a new age. In this age, a generation of
There are part
Europeans are
three.
born into a society which encourages violence, lack
There
of
is,
individuality,
yes.
and glory to the
Nice.
state. The thinkers of the Enlightenment and French Revolution are despised, and
No, they're throwing a bunch of black paper into that green blob, or that orange blob. That's
literature from classical liberal thinkers have been destroyed. As more are born into this world, the easier it becomes to maintain the myth of Adolf Hitler. Any form of political opinion simply branches off as a form of Nazism, an entire alternate world of political thought, based on the progression of the Aryan race. Europeans are taught of the ominous force across the Atlantic, an enemy just like the Jews and communists, the United States. Tune in for part 3, which I guarantee will not take.
Come on, America, you can do this. We defeated those commies. We can defeat the Nazis too. Am I right? But yeah, like, if, in my opinion, like, not saying this because I'm American, but we would win because we are America. Okay, but seriously, like, Germany probably would have gone into a giant civil war after Hitler died, just based off of, like, their unsustainable economic policies, rebellions, being overstretched, having the Italians as enemies. I think all those things would have probably made Germany die. Yeah, anyways, I forgot what I was saying, but I think they would have went into a giant civil war and collapsed, just like the Soviet Union did, except a lot sooner, probably. And then America would have came in, and they would have been like, and they would have taken over. Yeah. What did I do? Oops. Okay, anyways, let's finish this.
Take 2 weeks to make. This is Cody of the Alternate History Hub.
Oh, that was it. Okay. Yeah, stay tuned for part 3, guys. That's pretty cool. Thank you all for watching, and goodbye. Hello everyone, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like it and subscribe to my channel, and turn on the notification bell thingy. And if you didn't, then make sure to leave a thumbs down. Oh yeah, that would be greatly appreciated. And while you're at it, go ahead and watch my other videos. They're probably just as good, then if not better than this one right now. Except for my oldest videos, don't watch those. And, subscribe to these people down here, my fellow sergeants. They're other YouTubers that I either know or I have in high regards. Yeah, even my cat agrees. So, thank you for watching, and have a great day.